My name's Lila, and I used to think family was everything. At 28, I was pouring my heart into a tiny diner I ran in Denver. Nothing fancy, just a place where I could cook the kind of food I loved. Hearty, honest, and full of flavor. I wasn't rich or famous, but I had Ethan. 3 years together, and I thought we were solid. He was 30, a software engineer with a quiet charm that made me feel safe. We'd talk about opening a bigger place one day, maybe even a family. I was happy. Until that night at my cousin's birthday party. It was a loud, chaotic affair. Kids running around, music blaring, the smell of barbecue in the air. Ethan had gone to grab us some drinks, but after 20 minutes I started wondering where he'd disappeared to. I wandered toward the kitchen, figuring he'd gotten stuck chatting with someone. That's when I heard it. My mom's voice, sharp and certain, cutting through the noise like a knife. "Sophia's the one for you, Ethan. She's stronger, smarter. Lila's sweet, but let's be real. She's just a cook. Sophia's a doctor, for God's sake. You deserve someone who'll push you forward, not hold you back." I froze outside the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Sophia, my little sister, 26, the golden child with her medical degree and her perfect life, was better for him? I peeked through the crack in the door. Ethan stood there, holding 2 beers, his face shifting from surprise to something else, something thoughtful. He didn't laugh it off, didn't defend me. He just listened as my mom kept going. "I've seen how Sophia looks at you. She's been waiting for her shot. Lila's dreams? They're small potatoes. You need a woman with ambition." I wanted to barge in, to scream at them both, but my feet wouldn't move. My mom. Margaret, with her impeccable hair and her judgy tone, patted Ethan's arm like she was sealing a deal. "Think about it, Ethan, you two have chemistry. Lila's my daughter, sure, but Sophia's the future." Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "I don't know, Mrs. Carter. Lila and I have been together a long time." My mom raised an eyebrow, and what she got to show for it. A greasy diner and a pile of bills. Sophia saving lives. You do the math. That was it. The words hit me like a punch. My own mother tearing me down, selling me out to my boyfriend like I was some failed investment. And Ethan? His silence was worse than anything she said. He didn't argue, didn't say he loved me or that I was enough. He just stood there, nodding like he was actually considering it. I backed away, my chest tight, and somehow made it through the rest of the party. I smiled, I laughed, I hugged my cousins goodbye, but inside I was breaking. Driving home that night, I kept replaying it. My mom had always favored Sophia, her grades, her career, her everything. But this, convincing my boyfriend to ditch me for her, it was a betrayal I couldn't unhear. And the worst part, I didn't confront them. Not then. I went home, crawled into bed next to Ethan when he finally showed up, and pretended I hadn't heard a thing. That was my first mistake. I should have known it was only the beginning. The days after that party felt like walking through fog. I kept waiting for Ethan to say something, maybe laugh about how ridiculous my mom had been, or reassure me that he wasn't going anywhere. But he didn't. Instead, things started shifting, slow and subtle at first, like cracks forming in a wall you don't notice until it's too late. He'd come home later from work, claiming deadlines. His texts got shorter, less playful. I'd catch him smiling at his phone, then he'd flip it over when I walked by. I told myself I was paranoid, overreacting to a dumb conversation I wasn't even supposed to hear. But deep down, I knew. It was a Tuesday night, maybe 3 weeks later, when I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'd closed up the diner early. Business was slow, and I was too distracted to cook straight anyway. Ethan had said he was working late again, so I figured I'd surprise him with takeout at his place. I still had a key. We'd talked about moving in together someday, but when I got there, his car was already in the driveway, and the living room light was on. Weird, I thought, but I brushed it off. Maybe he'd finished early. I let myself in quietly, balancing the bag of Chinese food in one hand. The apartment was too still. No TV, no music, just a faint murmur from down the hall. Then I saw it. Sophia's coat, the fancy wool one she'd gotten for her first day as a resident, draped over the couch. My stomach dropped. I followed the sound, my sneakers silent on the hard wood, until I reached his bedroom door. It wasn't fully closed, just enough for me to see them. Sophia's long blonde hair fanned out across Ethan's pillow, his arm wrapped around her like it was the most natural thing in the world. They didn't even notice me standing there, frozen, until the takeout bag slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a thud. "Lila!" Ethan bolted upright, scrambling for the sheet like some cheap movie cliché. Sophia just sat there, calm as ever, pulling her shirt back on without a hint of shame. "What are you doing here?" he stammered, like I was the one who didn't belong. I couldn't even yell. My voice came out small, foreign. "How long?" That's all I could manage. Ethan looked away, rubbing his neck. "A couple months," he muttered. "Officially, but we've been talking." "Since your mom?" "Since my mom? What?" I cut him off, sharper now. "Since she told you Sophia's better than me? Since she pimped out her own daughter to steal my boyfriend?" Sophia finally spoke, her tone cool and detached. "Don't make this a soap opera, Lila. It just happened. You were going to find out eventually." "Just happened?" Like it was fate, not a choice? I stared at them, this perfect little scene they'd built behind my back, and something in me snapped, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet break. I didn't stay to argue. I turned and walked out, their half-hearted weight echoing behind me. The drive home was a blur, tears burning my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. The next morning, I went straight to my mom's house. She was in her pristine kitchen arranging a fruit platter like nothing was wrong. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "did you know?" She didn't even look up at first. "Know what, dear?" "About Ethan and Sophia." "Did you know they've been sneaking around?" She sighed, setting down a strawberry with annoying precision. "I suspected they'd get closer after I talked to him. And yes, I heard they've been spending time together. It's not a big deal, Lila. Relationships end all the time." I couldn't believe it. "Not a big deal? You pushed him toward her." "You told him I'm nothing." She finally met my eyes, her expression cold. "I told him the truth. Sophia's got a real career, a future. You're scraping by with that diner, chasing some childish dream. Ethan needs someone who matches him. They make sense together." Her words cut deeper than Ethan's betrayal. My own mom, the one person who was supposed to have my back, had sized me up and decided I wasn't worth rooting for. "Why?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "Why would you do this to me?" She stepped closer, her hand brushing my cheek like I was 5 again. "Because Sophia's always been the one who'll make it. You're too soft, Lila, too stuck in your little world. I was helping you both see reality." I pulled away, her touch burning me. "You're wrong," I said, barely audible. "You've always been wrong about me." That night, I didn't sleep. I packed instead, clothes, my chef's knives, a couple photos that didn't have them in it. My best friend Tara tried to talk me out of it when she found me loading my car at dawn. "You're just gonna run?" she asked, worried. "I'm not running," I told her, slamming the trunk. "I'm moving on." I scribbled a note before I left, 3 words for Mom, Sophia, and Ethan. "Watch me shine." Then I hit the gas, Denver shrinking in my rearview mirror, and pointed my car towards Seattle. I didn't know what was waiting for me there, but I knew one thing. I was done being the girl they threw away. Seattle hit me like a cold slap, rainy, gray, and loud in a way Denver never was. I'd shown up with $300 in my pocket, a beat-up suitcase, and my cooking gear, figuring I'd land on my feet somehow. I found a cheap studio apartment above a laundromat, walls thin enough to hear my neighbors' arguments, a stove that barely worked. But it was mine. No Mom, no Sophia, no Ethan. Just me and a chance to start over. I got a job at a little coffee shop a few blocks away, pulling espresso shots and plating pastries for minimum wage. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent while I figured out my next move. That's where I met Ryan. He was 32, all messy dark hair and sharp eyes, the kind of guy who walked into a room and owned it without trying. He'd come in every morning for a black coffee, no sugar, and sit at the counter with a laptop, typing away like the world didn't exist. One day, I'd had a rough shift, spilled a latte on myself, got chewed out by a customer, and I guess it showed. He looked up from his screen and said, "Rough day, huh?" I laughed, bitter. "Rough year, more like it." He didn't pry, just nodded and went back to his work. But after that we started talking. Small stuff at first, like the weather or how I'd tweak the shop's soggy muffins if I ran the place. A few weeks in, he caught me sketching a recipe on a napkin during a slow hour, something with local salmon and a herb sauce I'd been dreaming up. "You a cook or something?" he asked, peering over. "Yeah," I said, a little defensive. "A real one. Used to have my own spot back in Denver." He raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" I shrugged, not ready to spill my guts. Life happened, had to get out. He didn't push, just slid a business card across the counter. "I'm Ryan Holt. I'm starting a thing. Small restaurant, big ideas, sustainable food, local ingredients. Need a chef who knows their stuff. You in?" I stared at the card like it might bite me. "I don't even know you." He grinned, easy and warm. "You will. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. at this address. Bring a dish if you want. I'm betting you've got something worth tasting." I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I was tired of playing it safe. But the next day, I showed up at this rundown warehouse with a pan of salmon I'd cooked over my janky stove. Ryan took one bite, nodded, and said, "You're hired. We open in 3 months." Just like that. We called it Green Fork, a cozy spot with wooden tables, plants everywhere, and a menu built around what grew nearby. I threw myself into it, testing recipes, tweaking flavors, staying late to perfect the sourdough. Ryan handled the business side, permits, suppliers, the money stuff I'd always sucked at. He'd talk about feeding people right, not just filling plates, and I started to see he wasn't just some slick entrepreneur. He cared about the food, the planet, me. We'd argue over budgets or whether kale was overrated, but it was the good kind of fight, the kind that made us better. Months turned into a year, and Green Fork took off. Locals loved it, critics raved, lines stretched out the door. Ryan and I got close too. Late nights cleaning the kitchen turned into beers on the stoop. talking about everything. His dream of a food empire, my old life in Denver I still kept vague. He never pushed me to explain why I'd run, just listened when I let bits slip. One night, after we'd landed our first big review, he looked at me across the empty dining room and said, "You're tougher than you think, Lila. Most people would have quit by now." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. But he was right. I was tougher. I'd had to be. It wasn't some grand romance at first. We were friends, partners, a team. But then came the little things. His hand brushing mine when we plated dishes, the way he'd laugh at my dumb jokes, how he'd show up with coffee when I was dead on my feet. 2 years in, after a brutal 16-hour day prepping for a food festival, he kissed me, right there in the kitchen, flour on my apron, grease on his shirt. "Been wanting to do that for a while," he said, sheepish. I laughed, kissed him back, and that was it. We were us. We got married 6 months later. No big wedding, just a courthouse thing with Tara, who'd flown in from Denver, and Ryan's brother as witnesses. I wore a simple green dress. He wore a blazer over jeans. We didn't need fanfare. We had each other. That night, over takeout in our new apartment, he raised a beer and said, "To building something real." I clinked my bottle against his. To doing it together. For the first time since Denver, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Seattle wasn't just a fresh start anymore. It was home. And Ryan, he was the guy who saw me, really saw me, when everyone else had looked away. But I didn't know then how big we'd get, or how soon I'd face the people who'd broken me. That part came later, and when it did, it hit like a freight train. Green Fork wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a spark that lit something bigger. After that first year, word spread fast. Food blogs called us the future of dining. Locals packed the place every night, and even a few big-shot chefs from Portland swung by to see what the hype was about. I'd be in the kitchen, sweating over a sizzling pan of halibut, and peek out to see Ryan charming some critic or investor at a table. We were a machine. Me cooking my heart out, him dreaming up ways to take it further. And he had dreams, big ones. "Why stop at one spot?" he'd say, sketching plans on napkins. "Let's build something that lasts." So we did. 2 years after opening, we launched a second Green Fork in Tacoma, then a third in Portland. I trained chefs, built menus, made sure every dish had that Lila touch, fresh, bold, rooted in the land around us. Ryan handled the expansion, leases, loans, partnerships with farmers who grew the kind of stuff we cared about. Organic, sustainable, real. We fought sometimes, me wanting to keep it small and perfect, him pushing for more, but we always found a middle ground. He'd tease me, "You're the soul, I'm the hustle," and I'd roll my eyes, but he wasn't wrong. By year 4, we weren't just running restaurants, we had a brand. Green Fork popped up on magazine covers, got a shout-out on some Food Network show I barely watched. I even did a guest spot at a culinary festival in San Francisco, demoing a salmon dish while a crowd clapped like I was some rock star. Me? A rock star? The girl who'd been called just a cook by her own mom? It felt surreal, but I leaned into it. Ryan loved it too. "Told you you're tougher than you think," he'd say, grinning over a beer after those long days. Then came the real game changer. Ryan had this idea to go beyond restaurants, turn Green Fork into a full-on food company. "Think bigger," he said one night, pacing our apartment with that wild energy I loved. "Catering, packaged goods, maybe even health stuff. Food's connected to everything." I wasn't sold at first. Cooking was my thing, not boardrooms. But he had a way of pulling me in. So we started small. A line of sauces I'd perfected, sold at local markets. They took off, and soon we were in grocery stores across the Northwest. Next came catering for fancy events, weddings, tech launches, you name it. Money started rolling in, real money, not just enough to get by cash. There's when Ryan dropped the bomb. We were at our Portland spot, tasting a new dessert menu, when he slid a stack of papers across the table. "What's this?" I asked, licking chocolate off my spoon. "A deal," he said, eyes gleaming. "We're buying a hospital." I nearly choked. "A what?" He laughed. "Not to run it, just the business side. It's in Denver, a private place focused on community health. Fits our vibe. Good food, good living. I've been working on it for months." I stared at him. Denver. The name hit me like a ghost from the past, but I shoved it down. "You're insane," I said, half laughing. "And you're with me," he shot back. He was right, I was. We signed the papers a week later, officially owners of a hospital I'd never even seen. I didn't think much about who might work there, not yet. 5 years in, Green Fork wasn't just a name, it was an empire. We had 8 locations, a product line in every Whole Foods from Seattle to Boise, and a staff of over 200. I'd gone from a broke diner girl to a chef with a publicist, fielding invites to speak at food summits. Ryan was the face of the business side. Sharp suits, big ideas, still the guy who'd eat my burnt test batches without complaining. We'd bought a house, too, a Craftsman in Capitol Hill with a killer kitchen where I'd experiment on weekends while he pretended to help. Life was good, crazy good. I hardly ever thought about Denver anymore. Sophia, Ethan, my mom, they were shadows I'd outrun. But Ryan had one more idea up his sleeve. We were sprawled on the couch one night, takeout containers everywhere, when he sat up. 5 years, Lila. We've been at this half a decade. Let's throw a party. A gala, big and loud, to celebrate." I groaned. "I hate parties, you know that." He nudged me. "Not a party, a statement. Show the world what we've built. Investors, press, the whole crew. Plus, we can roll out the hospital deal, make it official." I sighed, but his excitement was contagious. "Fine," I said, "but I'm picking the menu." He laughed, pulling me close. Planning it took weeks. We booked a swanky hotel downtown, grand ballroom, chandeliers, the works. I obsessed over every detail. Cedar-planked salmon, foraged mushroom tarts, a dessert bar with my signature blackberry cake. Ryan invited everyone, our team, food critics, even some suits from the hospital we'd bought. I didn't look at the guest list too hard. I trusted him to handle it. Maybe I should have. Because as the date got closer, I started feeling this itch, like something was coming, something I couldn't name. The night before the gala, I was in our kitchen, tweaking a sauce recipe, when Ryan walked in, a little quieter than usual. "You okay?" I asked, stirring. He nodded, then hesitated. "Yeah, just a heads up. Some Denver folks might show. Hospital staff, you know." My spoon stopped. Denver? I hadn't been back in years, hadn't talked to my family since I'd left. "No big deal," I said, forcing a smile. "It's just business, right?" He squeezed my shoulder. "Right. You're the star tomorrow. Focus on that." I nodded, but as he walked away, my mind spun. Denver. What if they showed up? Mom, Sophia, Ethan. What would I even say? I pushed it out of my head. This was my night, our night. I'd built this life from nothing, and no ghost from the past could take that away. Or so I thought. Standing there, stirring that damn sauce, I had no idea how wrong I was, or how close I was to facing them all again. The gala night arrived like a storm I couldn't outrun. The hotel ballroom glowed, soft lights bouncing off crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white linen, the air thick with the smell of my food. Cedar-smoked salmon, roasted beets, that blackberry cake I'd spent weeks perfecting. I'd gone all out on a red dress, sleeveless, bold, the kind of thing I'd never have worn back in Denver. It hugged me just right, made me feel like the woman I'd become, not the girl I'd left behind. Ryan looked sharp in a tailored suit, his usual scruff tamed for once. "You ready to own this?" he asked, adjusting my necklace, a little silver fork charm he'd given me years ago. I smirked. Born ready. We stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they poured in. Chefs I'd trained, investors with fat wallets, a food critic who'd once called my risotto divine. I was in my element, shaking hands, laughing at Ryan's dumb jokes, feeling every bit the queen of this world we'd built. The jazz band played something smooth in the background, and for a while it was perfect. Then I saw them. They slipped in like shadows. My mom, Margaret, in a stiff navy dress that screamed old-school class. Sophia, her blonde hair pulled tight, doctor vibe still intact. And Ethan, looking thinner, grayer, like life had worn him down. My breath caught, but I didn't flinch. They weren't on the list, or so I'd thought. Later, Ryan told me they'd tagged along with a hospital exec he'd invited, some last-minute plus ones he hadn't clocked. But right then, all I knew was they were here, in my space, scanning the room like they owned it. I didn't move toward them. Let them come to me, I decided. Let them see what I'd made without them. Ryan must have caught my shift because he leaned in. "You good?" I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, just unexpected company." He followed my gaze, frowned, but didn't push. "Say the word and they're out." I shook my head. "No, they stay. This is too good to miss." They took their time circling the room, Mom nodding at people like she belonged, Sophia whispering to Ethan, him just trailing behind. I kept doing my thing, chatting up a supplier, laughing with Tara, who'd flown in to cheer me on. But I felt their eyes like pinpricks waiting for the right moment. It came when Ryan and I were mid-conversation with a city council guy about urban farming. Mom's voice cut through, fake sweet as ever. "Lila, darling, look at you." She swooped in, arms out for a hug I barely returned. "Mom," I said, cool but polite, "didn't expect you here." She waved a hand. "Oh, we wouldn't miss it. Heard about your little party through some hospital friends." Little party. I swallowed the jab. "Glad you made it. This is Ryan, my husband." He stepped up, hand out, all charm. "Ryan Holt, good to meet you, Mrs. Carter." Sophia jumped in, sizing him up. "Ryan Holt, the Green Fork guy? I've read about you, impressive." Her tone was calculated, like she was already working an angle. Ethan just nodded, awkward. "Ethan Miller. Congrats." I almost laughed. "Congrats!" Like he'd earned the right to say it. "Thanks," I said, keeping it short. "Enjoy the night." Ryan picked up the vibe, steering us away with a smooth, "We've got more guests to greet. Catch you later." But their faces? Priceless. Mom's smile twitched. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. They hadn't expected this. Me, thriving, next to a guy who radiated success, and they didn't know the half of it yet. Dinner went off without a hitch. Plates cleared, compliments flying. I caught glimpses of them at their table, picking at the food like it pained them to admit it was good. Then came Ryan's speech. He took the stage, all easy confidence, talking up Green Fork's journey. Our roots, our growth, the whole food that matters ethos. I stood off to the side, proud as hell. Then he dropped it. And tonight we're thrilled to announce our latest move, acquiring Denver Community Hospital, a new chapter for us, tying health and sustainability together. To our Denver team here tonight, welcome aboard. The room clapped, but I saw them, Mom, Sophia, Ethan, go still. Ryan spotlighted the hospital folks, and there was Ethan, squirming in his seat, technically part of our payroll now. Sophia's face drained of color. Mom gripped her glass too tight. I didn't plan it. Honest to God, I hadn't known they'd be here when we finalized that deal. But standing there, watching them process it, I felt something sharp and sweet twist in my chest. The guy who dumped me for my sister, the sister who'd taken him, the mom who'd orchestrated it, they were staring at the life I'd built, and it was bigger than anything they'd ever touched. I could have left it there, let the night roll on with them stewing in it, but they weren't done with me yet. As the applause died down and Ryan stepped off stage, I saw Sophia whisper something to Ethan, then Mom. They stood, weaving through the crowd, heading straight for me. Whatever was coming, I knew it wasn't over. And part of me, the part that driven out of Denver with nothing but a promise to shine, was ready for it. The gala was humming, guests mingling, glasses clinking, the jazz band picking up tempo. Ryan had just finished his speech, and I was basking in the glow of it all, letting the night sink in. We'd done this, built this empire, turned my pain into something unstoppable. I was about to grab a drink with Tara when I saw them cutting through the crowd, Sophia leading, Ethan a step behind, Mom trailing with that determined look she got when she wanted something. My stomach tightened, but I squared my shoulders. Whatever they had to say, I could handle it. Sophia reached me first, her doctor-perfect posture stiff as ever. Lila, we need to talk, she said, voice low but sharp. No great party, no small talk, just straight to it. Ethan hung back, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. Mom stepped up beside Sophia, her smile tight and fake. Somewhere private, she suggested, like she still had any say in my world. I glanced at Ryan, who'd drifted over, sensing trouble. Here's fine, I said, crossing my arms. What's this about? Sophia didn't waste time. The hospital, Denver Community. You and Ryan own it now, right? I nodded, slow, not sure where this was going. Yeah. Announced it tonight. Why? She took a breath, and for the first time I saw a crack in her armor, something desperate flickering in her eyes. They're cutting staff. Budget issues from before you bought it. I'm on the list, me and half my department. I could lose my job, Lila. I blinked, processing. Ethan finally spoke, his voice rough. Me too. I've been consulting for them, software stuff. If they downsize, I'm out. Mom jumped in, her tones syrupy but edged. We heard about the acquisition last week. Didn't realize it was you until tonight. But you're in charge now, or Ryan is. You could fix this. Fix this? I almost laughed. They weren't here to celebrate me. They were here to beg. Let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice steady. You show up at my gala uninvited, and now you want me to save your jobs after everything? Sophia's jaw tightened. This isn't about the past, Lila. It's about right now. I've got loans, a mortgage, Ethan too. We're not asking for a handout, just a chance. Ethan nodded, still not meeting my gaze. It's a mess back home. We didn't expect this. He gestured vaguely at the room, at me, like my success was some inconvenient surprise. Mom reached out, touching my arm like we were still close. Family helps family, Lila. You've done so well. Surely you can spare a little grace for your sister and Ethan. They're struggling. Struggling. The word hung there, heavy and absurd. I pulled my arm back, staring at her. Family, I said, soft but cold. Where was family when you told Ethan I wasn't good enough? When you pushed him to her? When you watched them sneak around behind my back? Silence. Sophia looked away. Ethan shifted like he wanted to bolt. Mom's face hardened, but she tried anyway. That was years ago. We all make mistakes. You've clearly moved on. Look at you. Can't you let it go? Let it go. Like it was my job to clean up their mess again. I could feel Ryan beside me, quiet but solid, waiting for my lead. The old Lila might have caved, might have said yes just to keep the peace, but I wasn't her anymore. I took a step closer, my voice low so only they could hear. You don't get it, do you? I didn't just move on. I built this. Every plate in this room, every dollar in that hospital deal, every second of this night. It's mine, not because of you, but despite you. I don't owe you anything. Sophia's eyes flashed. So what? You'll let us sink? That's your big win. I smiled, just a little. My win's standing right here. You sinking? That's on you. Mom tried one last time, softer now. Lila, please. We're proud of you. Really, just think about it. Proud of me. Funny how that only came out when they needed something. I looked at them, Mom with her calculated guilt, Sophia with her bruised ego, Ethan with his quiet regret, and felt the weight I'd carried for years start to lift. Not because I hated them, but because I didn't need them anymore. I'll think about it, I said finally. They perked up, hopeful, but I wasn't done. Not because you're family, because I'm better than that. If I help, it's my call, my terms, not yours. I turned to Ryan. Let's go. He nodded, slipping an arm around me as we walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel them standing there stunned. The power flipped in a way they'd never seen coming. Later, as the night wound down, Tara found me by the dessert table. What was that about? She asked, popping a blackberry into her mouth. I sighed. They want me to save their asses. Hospitals cutting jobs. She snorted. After what they did, ballsy. I laughed, short and sharp. Yeah, but you know what? I might do it. Not for them, but for me. Prove I'm not the one holding grudges. She grinned. That's my girl. Bigger person, bigger life. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd talk to Ryan, see what we could do. Not a bailout, but a fair shot like anyone else would get. Or maybe I'd let them figure it out. Either way, it was my choice now. And that felt like freedom. The gala wound down slow and sweet, guests trickling out, the band playing one last lazy tune, the air still buzzing with everything we'd pulled off. Ryan and I stayed till the end, thanking the staff, sneaking bites of leftover cake while the cleanup crew swept in. My red dress was wrinkled now. My feet ached from hours in heels, but I felt lighter than I had in years. We piled into the car, the city lights streaking past as we headed home. I leaned my head against the window, replaying that showdown with Mom, Sophia, and Ethan. It wasn't what I'd expected. Not some big, triumphant revenge. It was quieter, deeper, and somehow better. Ryan broke the silence as we pulled into our driveway. So what happened back there with your family? His voice was gentle, not pushing, just curious. I kicked off my shoes, curling up on the passenger seat. They're in trouble. Hospital's cutting jobs. Sophia and Ethan might be out. They asked me to step in, pull strings with you. He raised an eyebrow, shutting off the engine. Seriously, after all that? I nodded, half smiling. Yeah. Mom played the family helps family card, like that's ever meant anything to them. He turned to face me, streetlight catching the lines of his jaw. What'd you say? I shrugged. Told them I don't owe them squat. Might think about it, but only on my terms, not because they deserve it. He grinned, that slow, proud grin I loved. That's my Leela. You don't mess around. I laughed, soft. Guess not. Took me long enough to figure that out. We hauled ourselves inside, kicking off the fancy clothes for sweatpants and socks. Ryan grabbed a couple beers from the fridge and we flopped onto the couch, the night settling around us. You gonna do it? He asked, cracking his bottle open. Help them? I took a sip, staring at the label like it had answers. Maybe. Not a free pass. Nothing crazy. If there's a way to keep the hospital running without screwing our plans, I'd consider it. But they'd have to earn it like anyone else. No favoritism. He nodded, thoughtful. Fair. You call the shots. I'll back you either way. Just don't let them drag you down. I leaned into him, his arm slipping around me. They can't. Not anymore. Tonight proved that. And it had. Seeing them, smaller, desperate, grasping at the life I'd built, it didn't feel like victory over them. It felt like victory over the old me, the one who'd let their words define her. We sat there a while, quiet, the hum of the fridge the only sound. I thought about Denver, how I'd driven away with nothing but a busted heart and a promise to myself. Watch me shine, I'd written. And damn if I hadn't done it. Not just the restaurants, the money, the headlines, but this, a home with a guy who saw me, really saw me, and a life that fit like it was custom made. You know what's weird? I said, breaking the silence. I don't even hate them. I thought I would, seeing them again, but I don't. Ryan tilted his head. No? I shook my head. Nah, they're sad, you know. They got what they wanted, each other, their perfect match, and it's falling apart. I almost feel bad for them. Almost, he chuckled, pulling me closer. That's 'cause you're better than them. Always were. They just didn't see it. He was right. Mom had picked Sophia because she looked like success. Degrees, titles, all the shiny stuff. Ethan had gone along because it was easy. But me? I'd fought for this. Every recipe, every late night, every time I'd wanted to quit but didn't. And Ryan? He hadn't saved me. He'd stood beside me while I saved myself. That's what they couldn't touch, what they'd never get. I set my beer down, turning to him. If they hadn't screwed me over, I wouldn't be here, with you, with all this. He smiled, soft and real. Funny how that works, huh? Their loss, my gain. I kissed him then, quick but sure, tasting beer and home. Our gain, I corrected. He laughed and we clinked bottles one last time. To us then, and whatever's next. Later, climbing into bed, I felt it. Peace, real and solid. The gala wasn't some grand gotcha moment, though it could have been. It was a door closing, one I didn't need to knock on anymore. Mom, Sophia, Ethan, they'd fade back into their lives, maybe with my help, maybe not. But me, I was done looking back. I had Ryan, Green Fork, a kitchen full of ideas, and a future I'd write myself. As I drifted off, his arm heavy across me, I smiled into the dark. I'd shined all right, brighter than they'd ever dreamed, and that was more than enough.